Disney's Short Circuit is a variety of short films from Disney with many different styles of animation and storytelling. Premiering on Disney Plus back in early 2020, along with a slew of new shorts recently at the time of this video, they're all about different things, and range around about a minute and a half each. Each short also starts with a few words from the creators to let the audience know what the short is going to be about. With a total of 19 shorts, I'm going to rank these from worst to best. Please keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and I actually do like all these shorts. This is just my least favorite to most favorite. Now let's get started at number 19. Lucky Toupee is the story about a man who's trying to impress a girl on a date. He bought a toupee he ordered from a company literally called Lucky Toupee and wigs. The wigs themselves are handcrafted by leprechauns. The man orders one just in time for his date, but he ends up not being able to afford the wig and ends up fighting with the leprechaun for it. And in the end, he ends up losing his wig. His date shows up and he has no wig to wear, but it ends up being okay because it turns out she was also wearing a wig, and they end up leaving for their date. I found this one to be at the bottom of the list because I didn't really find it too interesting, at least compared to the rest of the shorts. Maybe if there was a bit more of the story, like them actually having to go on the date, would have felt a bit more exciting, but I still chuckled at the end. Lightning in a Bottle is about a young boy who wishes to capture a literal piece of lightning inside his glass bottle. He ends up succeeding in capturing one, but discovers that their piece of the sky is missing, and that a crazy storm starts. The boy eventually realizes that the lightning has to be brought back up into the sky where it belongs. He eventually does so and is treated to a light show. A pretty cool one. I like the concept of the lightning creatures, the animation looks very good with the creatures, and it's a certain lesson things are just not meant to be kept, and to always do the right thing and let things go. Exchange Student is about a young human girl who arrives at her new school in outer space. The planet itself is inhabited by blue blob aliens that don't warm up to her right away, and end up making fun of her because of her appearances and her taste in food. One day when they were playing in the schoolyard, the blobs lose their ball over the fence, and the girl goes to retrieve it. The ball is found in a patch of flowers, and the flowers ends up having mouths and then bite the girl. She ends up letting out a high-pitched scream which scares the plant, which reveals the ball and other things that have been lost in the past. It ends with the blobs praising her for retrieving the things they've lost. I really like the comic animation style of this short. It also has a very nice message to accept others for their differences, whether they look different or act different. Puddles is about a young boy with an active imagination who is playing around puddles. He jumps into one and ends up going through it into a magical world. Excited at first, he tries to get his sister's attention, but nothing seems to be working. He eventually gets fed up and takes her phone away from her and throws it in the puddle, and then he drags her into the puddle as well. She finally sees the magical world, and that's where the short ends. I found this one to be quite fun and very imaginative, seeing things what often kids would see and imagine, except we actually see a magical world. Some very nice 3D animation stylized to create a colorful short to enjoy. Crosswalk is about a law-abiding citizen trying to cross the street, but the light is taking forever. He sees a pigeon cross the street, which makes him sad. He attempts to cross without the light changing, but the streetlight keeps telling him no, and pretty much just messes with him from there, making the countdown go up instead of down, telling him he can go, but when he takes his first step, it tells him to stop again. This leaves the man angry and attempts to cross the street even though he's not supposed to. He shows the streetlight who's boss and makes it to the other side without any consequences. Or so he thought. He smiles in victory against the streetlight, but soon realizes he left his suitcase on the other side. And so the man is left with a new dilemma. This short gives an accurate interpretation of how most people feel when waiting at a crosswalk, and how it can feel excruciating. It also shows how doing something like jaywalking can have its consequences in the end. It's got some pretty funny comedy, and it feels like this short could be part of a grab bag of comedic skits. Fetch is about a young girl walking into a forest looking for her pet Oliver. She keeps calling him out throughout the forest, waving and throwing a stick to attract him. As she keeps traveling through the forest, we see what appears to be an invisible creature. It gets closer and closer to her, and in the end it charges toward her and swallows her. We see that she actually ends up being unfazed by it and is more concerned about the stuff that's inside the stomach rather than being eaten. It turns out that the invisible monster is Oliver, and it seems that all he wanted was the stick. It lets her out and she throws the stick to let him fetch it. The animation in this one looks beautiful, the landscapes look amazing, and the music gives off a warm fuzzy feel leading up to Oliver's reveal with a darker tone later on. This short shows that appearances can be deceiving, and the former perspective from an adult, Oliver can be seen as nothing but a monster, but from a child's perspective, it can be seen as, well, a friend. The race is about a Grim Reaper that is desperate to kill one person for a contest at his work, but the person he's trying to kill doesn't want to die, and gives him a run, or rather, a race for his money. After chasing his victim and killing many innocents along the way, the man stops before he can get to the finish line. The Reaper gets confused of why he didn't finish the race to win. Instead, the man goes to be with his wife, hugging her for possibly the last time. After the Grim Reaper notices, he thinks about his wife and family and how important to him they are. So instead of killing the man, he leaves to go see his wife. And that's how this one ends. The short, outside of all the death, is actually kind of wholesome. It's pretty much telling us to say that life is precious and to spend the time that we have with the ones that we love. Hair Jutsu is about a young girl afraid of getting her hair cut, but she has to because it's getting pretty long. She ends up imagining a scenario where she defends herself from the hairdresser, and her hair is alive. She fights off the hairdresser in her mind, and snaps back to her in the chair with the hairdresser shortening her hair's length. She ends up liking her hair short, and ends up with a lollipop. I found the story to be quite fun. It's what you would think of a child would imagine when going to a scary place, like the hairdressers. The animation, of course, is nice to look at. I especially like the imagined scenario where she's fighting the hairdresser. It goes into a kind of cel-shaded art style. Zenith is about the stars and constellations, specifically about a stag traversing through the universe, producing more galaxies and stars as it passes by. While doing so though, it accidentally causes a black hole, which starts to swallow everything in its path. In an attempt to fight it off, the stag charges straight towards it, which ends up forming a galaxy in the shape of the stag itself. Zenith was inspired by Fantasia and how its animation floats so well with the music, and it definitely shows here. It's really mesmerizing all the beautiful visuals and effects put into this one, and the music is pretty top notch and it serves the animation very well. The only little problem I have with this one is that the conflict gets resolved just a little too soon. If it was a little bit longer, I'm sure it could have been more explored, but there's only so much you can do in a minute and a half. Elephant in the Room, about a young elephant that gets separated from its herd and ends up being found by a young boy and his father. They end up taking him back to their banana farm to use him for chores, but all the boy wants to do is just to be able to play with him and have fun. But the boy sees how unhappy the little elephant is and tries to think of something to do for it. The next morning, the farm is bombarded with the herd of elephants that the little elephant lost. They stop dead in their tracks and notice the little elephant. The boy lets the little elephant go and he heads off back into the jungle with his herd. I very much like the art style in this one. It's quite similar to the other Disney short Paperman, which helps make it stand out among the rest of these shorts. The music helps, being very soft and cheerful at the same time, starting from sort of sad story but to a very happy ending. Drop is about a raindrop that ends up traveling all around a city. From a gutter drain to sticking to a fly, to sliding down a roof, to getting splat onto a windshield. But once he's on the windshield and gathers himself up, he sees a young child and finds it to be quite fascinating. He tries climbing towards the top of the windshield and the kid notices. The drop notices as well, and they end up pressing their fingers against each side of their window. After that, the raindrop is evaporated back into the clouds, ready to do the cycle all over again. This one is quite enjoyable, from first not wanting to leave to not wanting to go back again and again. It's a nice 2D animation style that somewhat comes off as a pastel type of art. I think it's very cute and kind of the type of story you would see in a children's storybook. Dinosaur Barbarian, about a barbarian riding a dinosaur while fighting evil on the daily. But he also needs to focus on his daily self, like hygiene. The short is essentially a 1.5-minute intro that pays tribute to the cartoons of the 80s, when intros to cartoons pretty much describe what the show is and what they were going to do in it. And with this, it's essentially no different. A fun musical that leaves you nodding your head and reminiscing about cartoon show intros. Number 2 to Kettering, about a girl taking the bus and just trying to be cheerful. But right from the beginning, where she enters the bus, the people around her start to dismiss her and bring her down with every interaction she has, which leaves her more and more sad each time. Eventually she gives up on being friendly and just keeps to herself, until a baby takes her hat and has a laugh about it. And this triggers a contagious laughter throughout the bus and overall creates a better mood for everyone. And the girl ends up leaving the bus as happy as she got onto the bus. This short pretty much simulates of how some people feel on the daily, and how even the most cheery people can end up feeling sad after dealing with people with sour moods. It even comes to the point to where a baby is the only thing that can cheer them all up. It just shows a little kindness to people can make a big impact on them. This short has some really nice animation, even looking like stop motion even though it's 3D. The only thing I don't like about this one is how the conflict gets resolved a little too soon, but the short's only a 1.5 minutes, so there's not much you could really do about it. Going Home is the story about a man visiting his home, and every time he does, certain things have changed. Each place he passes goes from his first visit back to his hometown to leading to what it is in the present. Buildings that were there before are either not there anymore or changed somehow. The same thing happens with the businesses and people. This leads up to the man getting to his parents' house. For the first time, his mom, dad, and dog are there, but with each visit they start to get older, and to eventually when they are gone completely, and it's the man leaving the house for the last time. This short is sad at most times, showing us that change is inevitable, and that even doing the same things, it will always be slightly different, one way or another, to the point where some things become unrecognizable. But it also shows that change can also be a good thing. You get to do new things that you wouldn't have known before, and meet new people. In the end, it's always nice to have what's familiar around you, but having things that can change could be good as well. And eventually, that thing that was once changed is now the familiar. Just a thought about a young boy crushing on a girl in his class. He starts to think about it, to which a thought bubble appears and everyone else can see it. He tries to stop thinking about her, even trying to hide his thoughts from everyone. And he ends up shoving it through a window before he heads into class, but it ends up being seen through the window. After everyone sees that he's thinking of the girl, he ends up being made fun of. After class, his thoughts return to him, or so he thinks. They end up being the girl's thoughts of him, and his thoughts actually return later. They end up merging together, and the boy and girl end up holding hands in the end. I thought the short was very cute. It's got a nice old school comic strip style you would see in the newspaper, and it shows young children dealing with different feelings at a young age, which I'm sure many children can relate to. Songs to Sing in the Dark is about two animals trying to intimidate each other, showing which one can be the more dominant species, as they each get louder and louder with the noise they make, to which in the end they actually team up together to thwart off a bigger threat to them. I'm really liking this art style. It's very similar to the game Ori and the Blind Forest, even down to the creature designs. It also has 3D creatures, and the noise projections are portrayed as 2D effects. With each noise that gets louder and louder from the creature, the visual 2D effects give off an intimidating look to who the creature sees the noise, as even though it's not accurate to what they look like. The visuals are very cool, and it's a very nice concept. I would like to see this kind of thing explored more in like a Fantasia movie. Seckles is about a grandmother going through her life story, except we're going backwards, so we start when she's an old woman, and then end up going in reverse to when she's a lot younger when she first moved into the house. After seeing her whole life, we cut back to the present where she's leaving the house for the last time. This one I found to be very interesting to watch because it was animated in VR, so the viewer wearing VR goggles can see the entire house. The animation may not look at its very best, it's kinda frame by frame time lapse, but the story is what gets you because it's very emotional and personal from the director. Jingua is about a woman visiting her mother's grave and practicing kung fu. But while practicing her kung fu, more of the forest and landscapes appear around her. She starts to struggle here and there while performing certain exercises, but no matter how much pain she is in, she tries to overcome it, and does so, but she ends up being badly injured in the end. I really enjoyed this one's art style of watercolor and calligraphy, and it really uses it well to show how emotional it can be. The music is very powerful in this one. It really helps elevate the story while trying to show the struggles of life and the people we lose throughout it. Downtown is about a man who misses his bus while traveling downtown. He ends up leaning his back against a building, which creates living art in the shape of an airplane manta ray or a mixed version of the two, which ends up taking him across town to where he needs to go. But while taking him downtown where he needs to go, they end up leaving paint trails behind them, making the city itself more vagrant and wild. The man at first wants it to all stop, but then realizes once he's in the tunnel that he's also able to control the color himself and starts to have fun with it. He ends up leaping off a tall building, seeing all the color that has been spread throughout the city, and in the end is left off with a lighter view of the city. The animation in this one is really good to look at, with the blend of the 3D city and the 2D colors being painted all over. I really enjoyed the concept of this, with the sad man trying to find his joy, and then he gets shown that there's more than the status quo, and to enjoy and appreciate different things. I like the extra detail of the background characters and even the main character are pretty much just silhouettes, and that the only thing that stands out is the color itself, which is why Downtown is my personal favorite of the Disney short circuits. These experimental shorts are great, seeing some interesting concepts and different varieties of animation and music. Whether or not they've been new or been used 1,000 times, they're a fun watch and I definitely recommend it all, and I hope we get to see more in the future.